Sean, 20, changed his mind at 30. Sean and I have been married for 5 years, and our daughter Evie was born 3 months ago. No matter how you look at it, life should be happy and perfect. But when Evie was just 1 month old, he asked for a divorce. Sean and his lover sat in the living room, the two of them were upright, holding hands. Their faces were exactly the same determination. And I was the only obstacle before this couple ran towards a happy life. Let's get a divorce. Sean repeated it calmly, fearing that I didn't hear it clearly. At this time, my daughter was lying in the crib in the master bedroom, crying loudly. She was uncomfortable because she had only changed half of her diaper. I was in a trance for a moment when I heard Sean's proposal, but my daughter's crying brought me back to reality. But I was no longer in the mood to care about the trivial matters of these two people, so I hurried to take the new diaper back to the bedroom. But my action triggered the anxiety in his lover's heart. And was really anxious. She had planned for so long, just to force me to leave today. Seeing that she had confessed, I was still indifferent. She rushed up and grabbed me directly. She cried and said, "Lily, just think that I am sorry for you. Just let go. This way we will both suffer." This finally made me look at them straight in the eye. Sean felt guilty and hesitant, and his expression was very contradictory. My daughter was crying, but he insisted on standing here, watching his lover stop me. Sean didn't dare to look me in the eye. Seeing that I was staring at him, his eyes wandered left and right, and he just said, and I are sincere." I looked at him. I didn't say anything. He pursued me for 3 years. On the day of our wedding, he cried in front of relatives and friends and said that he would treat me well. We have supported each other for 7 years, and our baby has just turned 1 month old. Now, he said that they are sincere. So have I been fake all these years? Finally, I spoke. I said to Anne, "I am not in pain, you are. You are the mistress. Legally and logically, I am his wife." Anne's expression twisted for a moment. It was obvious that she really cared about this title and everything under this title. What else could she care about? True love? Just now she was crying and begging. Now that I had hit her sore spot, she would no longer pretend. She grabbed me and held my arm tightly, her sharp nails almost digging into my flesh. "Lily, you are still young, there will be many choices in the future. Why do you have to be so stubborn? Yes, you are so young." I said with a fake smile, "You have so many choices, what can't you do? You have to be a mistress, you can't see the light." And was caught off guard by me, and her fig leaf was torn off. She screamed and cried again. And at this time Sean couldn't see it anymore. He pushed me away. And was already holding me very close, and I was pushed by him unexpectedly. My center of gravity was off balance, and I stumbled back a few steps and finally fell to the ground. I suddenly felt that the whole world seemed absurd. I had just finished my confinement and had not returned to work yet. I was weak, and I was knocked to the ground by my husband. At this moment, our daughter was crying loudly in the master bedroom. The baby's crying came through the half-open door of the bedroom, intermittently. My husband, the father of the child, seemed to be a great hero, as if he had done something great, bravely resisted the evil forces, and protected the woman he loved most. He stood there majestically, simply standing tall. Listening to my daughter crying in the bedroom, I gritted my teeth and said word by word, "Okay, then divorce." Sean is 31 this year, and I am the same age as him. Compared with many people of the same age, we had children later. We were campus sweethearts and got married after graduation. After 10 years of love, Sean found true love this year. Life is really worth it. Our divorce was simple. The property was easy to count, there was no overlap in work, and there was no debt. But it involved child custody. Sean's meaning was very clear, he felt that his daughter Evie should belong to him. He was over 30, and this was his first child. It was easy for him to give up property, but it was really hard to give up the child. And I refused to let go. Sean was still young, and he and Anne were together, so they would definitely have children in the future. What would my daughter's situation be at that time? My marriage life was already in ruins, and I would never let my daughter go down the same way. But Evie is only 3 months old now and is still breastfeeding. It is clear where she belongs. Even my lawyer friend advised Sean not to dwell on this, otherwise, coupled with the divorce cooling off period, it would drag on forever. Sean was still not convinced and was very depressed, but he could not resist Anne's urging. She was too eager to see us separate and take over. In the end, Sean had to agree. But in order to retain his visitation rights and to please me, he might have felt a little guilty. He made a lot of concessions in terms of property. This also aroused Anne's dissatisfaction. They even had a small quarrel because of this. I heard about this and I was very calm. I have known Sean for so many years, and I know what kind of person he is. He was so obsessed with the custody of his daughter just to let the outside world know. He and I broke up naturally because of a breakdown in our relationship, and he was very willing to take responsibility for this child. He is still a good person. We have been together for so many years, and our friend circles overlap a lot. He still has to socialize and be a person in the future, and he can't lose face. So even if he quarrels with Anne, he has to do this. I just sneered at this. You can visit if you want. But you must pay alimony, and you will be responsible for all the school expenses of our daughter before she reaches adulthood. Sean agreed immediately. This request was reasonable, and he didn't want to be accused of mistreating his own daughter. But this touched Anne's bottom line. She even rarely tore her obedient and lovely image, and got angry with Sean and me when the lawyer was away. And was very dissatisfied. Lily, you have a good income. Why should Sean pay so much? Sean and I will have a family and children in the future, so why should I help your children pay tuition? In this emotional battle, she has won a great victory, and I have been defeated step by step. So it is normal for her to have the arrogance of a winner. Sean pulled him, but did not stop her aggressiveness. I said calmly, even if Sean and I are separated, we are still Evie's biological parents. In this case, we must take responsibility. This is stipulated by the law. If you are unhappy, I can't do anything. I looked at Sean and said, you don't have to give it. I will go to the court to submit documents and apply for a fair ruling. If the court also rules that you don't have to pay child support, I have nothing to say. Sean was embarrassed. He has been doing well in the past few years and is now an executive of a listed company. People need face and trees need bark. He earns $1 million a year, but he has to go out and be sued by his ex-wife for not paying child support. Who can afford this face? How will he get along in the circle in the future? At that time, he directly pulled Anne back and forced her to sit on the seat. His face was cold and his tone was icy. Don't make trouble. This is probably the first time he spoke to Anne like this. Anne looked unbelievable. She didn't care about such a small amount of money. What she cared about was the existence of her daughter Evie. It was because of this child that she was so nervous that she forced Sean to divorce me, even without dignity. I can give birth, and is young and can give birth too. But she can't just waste her youth like this and be a mistress who is looked down upon by others forever. What's more, after this happened, she even lost her job. In our company, I am higher than her and am Anne's leader. Any subordinate who stabs the family of his leader in the back will have no place to stand anywhere. Since she has no job, she must be Mrs. Xia. Seeing me sign the divorce agreement, and could only do her best to suppress the dissatisfaction in her heart. Anyway, what she wanted was already in her hands. As for other things, it doesn't matter if she pays a little more. After deciding on the division of property and the ownership of custody, we signed the divorce agreement and filed for the first divorce in the service hall. We only need to wait for the cooling-off period of 3 months before we can do it again, and then the divorce certificate will be in our hands. After walking out of the hall, I suddenly turned around and looked at Sean. Anne saw my action and immediately hugged Sean's arm very defensively. Can you give me some time? I said humbly and kindly, the children are too young. There are too many things at home. My vacation is almost over and I have to go back to work. It will take some time to move out of the house. The apartment we are currently living in is our wedding house, a flat of 150 to 160 square meters. When we divorced, it was given to Sean, and I had to move out. This reason is really irresistible. Sean agreed without thinking, and didn't even consider Anne's face next to him. After all, they are orphans and widows, and they don't have enough manpower. It is indeed impossible to move out of such a large house with so many children's things in a short time. He calmed me down. This is what I should do, don't worry. It is impossible to say that he has no guilt or hesitation in his heart. I don't know if it was for the sake of conscience or to show that he was a good person, but Sean also specifically reminded me, you live here first, and you can move out whenever you want. If you need anything, you must tell me. I looked at him with pretended gratitude. But I knew that when the property was divided, he was also given a small apartment. It would definitely become a love house for him and Anne. Anne's face turned very ugly. But she still came to me with a fake smile and said, this is what we should do. If you need any help, you must tell us. I know a moving company that is reliable. I will book it for you. When the time comes, they will come to your door to help you pack, which is very fast. Besides, you are also given a small apartment. You two mother and mother live in too big a place. The house is empty and unpopular. Her purpose, anyone with eyes can see, is to drive people away. Evie is too young. Moving is not like moving with adults, where people move and things move. The weather is getting colder these days, and children are more likely to get sick. I begged, give her some more time. The lawyer is our mutual friend, and he looked delicate when he saw this. When Sean saw him like this, he couldn't hold back his expression, she can stay as long as she wants, and you don't need to give her orders. And wanted to say something, but he scolded her, so she had to hold back angrily. She also forced a smile, I'm doing this for your own good. Seeing them like this, I didn't say anything. It's not just 1 or 2 days, and I'm not dead today. When did the problem in our marriage arise? Sean and I were high school classmates. We established a romantic relationship when we were freshmen. From that time on, our lives also began. Two young people with nothing in their hands, just like this, leaning on each other, supporting each other in a strange city, fighting monsters and upgrading all the way, cheering each other up. Finally, it's today. We have a car and a house, and our careers are successful. But our family is no longer happy. This journey has been too long. I don't know when our marriage was no longer happy, and even no longer reliable. There is also a gap in our relationship. This gap is big enough to accommodate someone else. When we were young, we loved each other and thought we could grow old together. But now that we have come to this point, we are standing next to each other and feel that each other is a stranger. In the past, we had a deep affection and loyalty, and we would be crazy and resentful of each other over trivial matters. Now that we are divorced and separated, we are both calm and composed, without any temper. It was drizzling outside, and I took out an umbrella from my bag and prepared to leave. But in the end, Sean called me. Don't blame her. At the end of this marriage, he called me, but he didn't dare to look me in the eye. He just looked at the water stains on the floor with his eyes tilted. You blame me. Don't blame her. When he called me, I paused, but didn't look back. I walked away with an umbrella. I laughed when I heard it. Holding an umbrella, walking in the drizzle, I laughed and cried. I was moved by such a kind of heart. I stared at the raindrops sliding down from the eaves of the umbrella expressionlessly, and my fingers tightly grasped the umbrella handle. I was not moved by their deep affection at all. He really apologized to me. Because in the divorce agreement today, Sean told me that he and Anne had been together in July 2 years ago. And at that time, we had just lost our first child. We have always been healthy, but I don't know why it seems that we lack a little faith in terms of children. We have been preparing for pregnancy for a year and a half, but there was no movement in the belly. My mother was so anxious that she prayed to the gods, and my mother-in-law got a folk remedy from somewhere. She burned the incense sticks into ashes and mixed them with water for me to drink. I studied biopharmaceuticals for both my undergraduate and graduate studies. How could I believe this? The water was bitter and hard to drink, so his mother opened my mouth and poured it in. Because of this, we had a family war for a while. Sean was bullied by both sides, but he could only hold it in, being a grandson and trying to please both sides. In the end, he finally made us reluctantly shake hands and make peace, and we booked a high-end restaurant and the whole family gathered together. We had this meal together and pretended nothing happened. We were still a family. I don't know what I ate that day, but I felt nauseous and vomited all the time. Sean was afraid that I would eat something bad and would cause trouble for the restaurant. As experienced people, my mother and mother-in-law suddenly became very happy. Yes. That's right, I was pregnant. But at that time, it was just the time for me to be promoted at work. The pharmaceutical company system is huge and the relationships are complicated. I have no background, nothing in my hands, and it is really not easy to fight alone for so many years. Sean strongly urged me to give up this promotion opportunity, inform the company of my pregnancy, and reduce work pressure as much as possible. But I am not such a person. I have a strong personality, and I am unwilling to lag behind others in everything. So after a very painful inner struggle, I told Sean that I gave up, but concealed my pregnancy from the company. I devoted myself wholeheartedly and desperately to this competition for promotion, working day and night to prepare materials, reports, and PK with customers. During that time, I worked overtime every day. Although Sean noticed something was wrong, he was on a business trip and was not in the local area, so he could not reach him. And his mother was very dissatisfied with me. I would quarrel with them every day when I woke up. Sean's mother is a very traditional rural woman. In her cognition, a woman who does not have a child at the age of 28 and wants to pursue a career is simply a monster. She is really good to me, but she cannot accept that her daughter-in-law is a monster. So she could only desperately urge her son to persuade me, but Sean was out of town on a business trip and could do nothing. Sean was caught between the pressure of work and the problems of family, and he was in a dilemma and overwhelmed. But I was very competitive. I fought hard in the workplace with my belly, and I defeated pregnancy reactions, competitors, and difficult customers. But the accident happened in an instant. On the day I received the notice of job promotion, the company held a celebration banquet for me. Just when everyone was about to leave the company, someone splashed a puddle of water at the door, and I stepped on it and slipped. The child was gone. This was a bolt from the blue for us. The company was afraid of taking responsibility, so it gave me paid recuperation leave. And I was bedridden, crying every day. My mother-in-law had a heart attack and was admitted to the hospital. After she was rescued, the first thing she did was to rush into the ward and slap me in the face, scolding me for harming their eldest grandson. My mother was with me to wipe my tears. But when she saw my mother-in-law scolding me like that, she was furious and started to scold her without any courtesy. At this time, Sean finally ended his long business trip. He returned home and saw that the family was in such a state of unrest. Waiting for him was me, who was unconscious on the bed due to the anesthesia, and my mother-in-law and mother with bruised faces. During that time, he was under a lot of pressure at work. Originally, his job required him to travel frequently, and he was basically a frequent flyer, which put a lot of pressure on his body and mind. He was exhausted and didn't want to go home after get off work, but chose to sit in the car and smoke for a while before going upstairs. It was probably at this time that Anne, who came from the company to deliver documents to me, found him and knocked on his car window. She also knocked on the door of his heart. The departure of that child took away the harmonious relationship between Sean and me, and also took away the peace of our family. My mother-in-law went back to her hometown in anger. It was not until I got pregnant again this year that she put aside her past grudges and couldn't wait to take care of me. This time, I had a high position in the company and a stable status, so I chose to work from home and stay in bed to protect the fetus. I knew in my heart that this regret had caused a rift between us. But now it is finally complete. Although it is late, it is still perfect. During the pregnancy, the condition of this baby was not good, and because of the progesterone, my personality and temper were very irritable. And Sean always hugged me, and he gently told me not to worry about anything. He just hoped that we could be safe and smooth for mother and daughter. At that time, I was very moved and thought I had found a perfect man who was one in a million. It was not until after I finished my confinement that he asked for a divorce. Maybe it was out of guilt towards me. When we divorced, he answered everything I asked. Sean said that he noticed and because she was pitiful. He wanted to protect her. And is actually a good girl. She is not married yet. She was delayed by her previous boyfriend. Sean said she has been following that boyfriend since her student days until last year. He didn't marry her. After checking, she found out that he was married. She has been a mistress for so many years. When he said this, Sean was very emotional. He held Anne's hand and said, "So I really feel sorry for her. I want to protect her well." I didn't say anything, just stared at Anne silently. But Anne, whose hand he held, became flustered. She kept looking at me nervously, afraid that I would expose her background. Yes, Anne's story is indeed true. She has been following a boyfriend without any status from college to now. That boyfriend is the vice president of our company. It was he who introduced Anne to the company and arranged a good position for her, with high pay, little work and close to home. She was a mistress, and she was clear about it. She was not an innocent mistress who was deceived. Some time ago, the vice president contacted the HR department and fired Anne directly without compensation. I was still feeling sorry for her at the time, but Anne packed up and left without saying a word. Thinking about my divorce dilemma today, it is obvious that the vice president had already discovered that Anne and Sean were together at that time. So he was furious. It's okay for him to betray his wife, but it's not okay for him to be betrayed by a mistress. So he quickly kicked Anne out of the company. Any original wife would have a tantrum at this time and tell Sean what kind of woman he was with. But I just sat there motionless, and even signed the divorce agreement without saying a word. Because I resented it. I had obvious hatred in my heart. Sean and Anne, they not only destroyed me, but also my daughter's original family. I should have had a peaceful and beautiful life. But this couple teamed up to destroy it. I will not let them go. I will also torture them slowly. What Sean never expected was that after we got divorced, I, the client, was very calm. His parents, however, were in a big fight. This child of mine was not only born with my hard work, but also the child that Sean's mother waited for with great difficulty and vigilance. Now I heard that Sean and I were divorced, but the child was awarded to me. His mother was the first to get angry. Originally, Sean's father had twisted his waist in the countryside during this period, and my mother-in-law went back to take care of him. When she left, my mother-in-law looked at Evie, reluctant to let her go, and looked back every few steps. As a result, when she came back, Evie was no longer their family. In a flash, the son kicked his wife and children out of the house. Such a big granddaughter just flew away. This incident caused the mother-in-law to take a car with the father-in-law who had a sprained waist. As soon as she entered the house, the mother-in-law grabbed Anne's hair and started to wrestle. "You vixen, where are you going to drive my granddaughter? You destroy other people's families, you deserve to be killed by 1,000 cuts." The old lady cried loudly, "How can you be so cruel to such a small child?" Sean was there to stop the fight and comfort his parents, with an awkward look on his face. His father had sprained his waist and wanted to hit him, but he could only take off his slippers and throw them at him. "I think you are sick." Sean dodged. The slipper hit Anne, and she cried again. Sean could only stammer, "Lily and I really don't have any feelings for each other anymore." The mother-in-law said bluntly, "What about the child? We still have a lot of feelings for the child, why don't you just kick us two old people out of the house?" Sean had nothing to say. He could only quickly express his position. "I am definitely still Evie's father, and I will definitely be responsible for her in the future. You are not responsible for anything when your family is gone." The reaction of the old couple was really violent, which surprised Sean. Anne's hair was messed up, and she hid behind Sean with tears on her face. But now Sean was too busy to protect her. After all, it was done. When they were fighting, Evie suddenly cried loudly. She was hungry and needed to make milk powder. When the mother-in-law heard the cry, she pricked up her ears alertly. She hurriedly said, "Hey, baby, don't cry." I held Evie, coaxed her a few words, and handed her to Sean. "Hold her for a while, Mom, and I will go to the kitchen to make milk." This reason was too legitimate to refuse. The child was already pushed over, and Sean subconsciously opened his arms and held her firmly. Evie's face turned red from crying, and she was out of breath. Sean could only hold her slowly, rocking her and coaxing her. "Hey, baby, don't cry, baby." When Evie saw that someone was accompanying her, her temper was gone. At that time, she just hummed a few times, grabbed Sean's fingers, and laughed again. The little hand, holding the adult's finger. Sean's heart was about to melt. He subconsciously held Evie and sat down on the sofa. "I think this child looks like me. Dad, take a look." Sean's father also went over to see when he heard the voice. Seeing that the family was having fun, there was no place for her. And was embarrassed and couldn't fit in. She had no choice but to go up and tease the baby, imitating Sean, stretching out her fingers to hook Evie's little hand. As a result, Anne's new manicure was too sharp and poked Evie's cheek. Evie burst into tears again. Sean finally coaxed the child to stop crying for a long time, and now he saw the child was suddenly pricked by his nails, and he was a little angry. Anne retracted her hand in dismay. At this time, the milk powder was finally prepared. I took the child away and fed her milk. The sweet and soft child left his arms, and Sean felt a little lost. He wanted to wait until the child finished drinking the milk before hugging him. At this time, and really couldn't stay any longer. It was getting late, and she yawned several times. She acted coquettishly, "Let's go back, there are so many of us here, and it's hard for people to rest." This is right, children can't sleep when there are too many people. Sean's apartment is a small one-bedroom, one-living-room apartment, which is enough for him and Anne. The two elderly people came very suddenly, and he was not prepared. He planned to take them out to live in a hotel. But my mother-in-law refused to let go of Evie. Sean tried to persuade her for a long time, until I said that my mother-in-law could live in a hotel nearby and come to my house to help me take care of Evie the next day, and then I was reluctant to persuade her. When my mother-in-law left, she was very worried and looked back every few steps. She reminded me, "You are a woman with a child. If there is anything, you must call us." I nodded. Yes. The call must be made. They have ruined my life. How can I let them live in peace? My mother-in-law and father-in-law live in a hotel at the entrance of the community. I originally wanted to hire a nanny, but my mother-in-law was worried, so they came to my house every day to look after Evie, help me cook, and do housework. And Sean would be called by my mother-in-law every day to come over for dinner and accompany Evie, and only go home at night. And didn't have a job during this period, so she could only wait for him to come back at home every day. But Sean came back later and later. She was so angry. Indeed, at that time she told Sean that as long as she had him, she didn't want anything else. Then she lost her job, and Sean felt that he owed her a lot, so he agreed to divorce me. She must not be able to figure out why Sean was still tied to me and this child even though they were divorced. But she understood Sean's character and knew that he would be soft-hearted and not hard-hearted. So recently, she didn't make a fuss in front of me again. At night, I called Sean. I said hurriedly, "Evie has a fever." "Sean, I sent my car to be repaired. Can you come and take us to the hospital?" It was estimated that the two had just fallen asleep when Anne asked angrily who it was. "Mom and Dad are so worried. Evie is older now and has so many things. We really can't do anything." I was so anxious that I almost cried on the phone. "Are you asleep? I didn't mean to disturb you, please." This broke Sean's heart. "What's wrong? Wasn't she fine during dinner this afternoon?" He said without thinking, "Pack the child's things, tell Mom and Dad not to worry, I'll come now." I didn't lie. Evie really had a fever. She was feverish and vomiting, and we were at a loss. But I am also an adult, and it is completely within my ability to handle this matter. Even if no one helps, I can take her to the hospital alone and solve this problem. But Evie is Sean's biological daughter after all. I have this kind of labor, so I won't waste it. Seeing their granddaughter's eyes tightly closed, but she kept vomiting milk, Sean's parents were so anxious that they called him desperately. Sean drove over quickly. The house was full of women, children, and the elderly. At this time, Sean had to take on the job of a family pillar. He ran around and drove us to the hospital quickly. He first registered for the children's emergency room, created a file, saw a doctor, and took his daughter for examination. Evie's white blood cell count was abnormal in the blood routine. The doctor suspected pneumonia and needed to take an X-ray. It was too late, so Sean took a taxi to send the two elders back to stay. After he took his daughter to take an X-ray, he held his daughter and sat with me in the crowded children's hospital waiting. At this time, Evie had an antiemetic injection and finally stopped vomiting. She held Sean's fingers tightly and fell asleep, but her brows were furrowed. Sean carefully used his fingers to smooth out her eyebrows, and said to me with a smile, "This child has thick eyebrows, and will be blessed in the future." He whispered to me, "Our Evie is much prettier than the child next to her." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. When Sean was getting the injection just now, he saw other children crying and making a fuss, and he just felt annoyed. But when Evie started crying during the injection, he felt like a hand was pulling at his heart, and he wished that the injection would hit his own flesh, and he begged the nurse to be gentler. The doctor said, "There is nothing wrong with the child, but there is a shadow on the lung. If you have the conditions, do further precise examinations." Sean was going crazy. He said anxiously, "What should I do?" The doctor said, I personally suggest that you go to a large hospital in the provincial capital to make an appointment with a specialist. The medical conditions there are good, and the results of the examination are more accurate. You still can't be careless about the child's affairs. But if you are afraid of trouble. Sean interrupted the doctor directly, and he rushed to say, we are not afraid of trouble. You tell me which direction you want to see. My classmate works in the provincial capital city hospital. I will contact him tonight to transfer to another hospital. Parents are anxious when they see their children sick. So this situation is also common for doctors. It's just that he may not have thought that our seemingly ordinary couple is actually divorced. This tossing is very late. Evie could have been hospitalized, but Sean felt that the children's hospital was crowded and he had recently seen several news reports about human traffickers, so he was very worried, so he drove Evie and me back home. It was very late when we got home, and he subconsciously took off his shoes and coat and prepared to go to the bedroom to sleep. But at this time, he remembered that he had divorced me. His hand holding the coat also stayed there. In the end, he left. When he left, Sean looked back every few steps, and told me very worriedly, if Evie still has a fever in the middle of the night, call me. You must call me. Everyone who has a sick child in their family knows very well how long and energy-consuming this is. And that's what I did. I recklessly directed Sean to run around for Evie. Whether it was out of a sense of responsibility as a father or because his parents threatened him with a knife, Sean did it and was happy to do it. Men are like this. When the child is born and he hasn't seen a few times and the relationship is not close, he can say whether he wants to get married. But when he participates in the process of raising children, he pulls the child with one hand, brings her up, and watches her grow up day by day. At this time, his feelings for other women will seem less important. Now the number of specialists in the hospital is very tight. It takes time to ask for help, and Evie's condition is very recurrent. Sean received my calls in the middle of the night countless times, and he got dressed and got up without hesitation, and drove Evie to the hospital for examination and injection. And the unclear black shadow on Evie's lungs is more like Sean's heart disease. He found countless connections and ran around. He asked for help from many people just to invite a famous old professor to see Evie, and he spent a lot of money to do the most sophisticated examination. With such efforts and getting along, Evie is like a piece of flesh on Sean's body. It was because of this that he realized how much he owed Evie. Yes. When Evie starts to be sensible and go to school, how will she look at him? Will her classmates laugh at her? If I remarry in the future, she will still have a stepfather, and she will call another man dad. Now there are many social news about stepfathers hurting and abusing stepdaughters. How can he guarantee that the person I remarry has good character and noble character? Sean has a colleague who is the head of the next department. This colleague and his wife separated because of emotional problems, and their child was bullied in school because of this matter and was beaten with a concussion. Sean saw this colleague rushing to the hospital in a panic, and his usual calm attitude was gone. His colleague is still a son. What if Evie also encountered such a thing? She is still just a little girl, how can she bear it? Will she be bullied because of her parents' divorce? For the first time, Sean looked at Evie and began to think whether his decision to divorce was too hasty. Even if he had to divorce. Why couldn't he wait until Evie was sensible, and then teach her well, so that she would understand that her parents separated because of a broken relationship? Of course, that would take time. But Anne could follow her ex-boyfriend for so long without any status, why couldn't he do the same to Sean now? He wouldn't treat her badly. Just like now that Anne has no job and stays at home every day, Sean feels very guilty facing her. And said that because she was good to Sean, the company took my feelings into consideration and made the move to fire her. After listening, Sean gave her a secondary card without saying a word, letting her spend as she pleased. Isn't he doing enough? And Evie, she is still so young, still a child, so pitiful. These thoughts bothered Sean all the time, and they bound him like ropes. But at the same time, Anne didn't think so. She couldn't accept that her good situation was completely ruined because of a child. In the past, she followed the vice president of the company without any status, and he also gave her a job and many benefits. He also spent a lot of money on her over the years. And when she followed the vice president, no one dared to talk about her. But she followed Sean for love, and after she really became a mistress, everyone could point at her nose and scold her, ridicule her, and say that she was a shameless vixen. And now she followed Sean, because of love, she lost her job, her reputation, and all she got was a secondary card. She lost her sponsor and job for him. And chased me to the hospital that day. I came back from getting water and passed by the stairwell when I heard them quarreling. She screamed, when we were fine, she got pregnant. You should have taken her to have the baby aborted long ago. The baby is sick now, which means she shouldn't have been born at all. She is a jinx. This made Sean furious. These days, he worked hard and shamelessly begged this classmate and that friend just to get Evie a place to see an old professor in the provincial capital. And the woman in front of him actually told him that his daughter shouldn't be alive. He no longer had a trace of love and pampering for Anne. He was furious and pushed her directly. It was you who broke up her family, and you cursed her. I already owe her a lot. Do you still have any shame? This was like a slap in Anne's face. In the reflection, she was sitting on the steps and shaking. Anne collapsed. But at this moment, she suddenly covered her belly and started rolling on the ground. Her body curled up and trembled like a chamois. At first, Sean thought she was pretending, so he ignored her completely. But when he really saw Anne's pale face, he realized that something was wrong. I retreated to the corner and saw him running wildly with Anne in his arms. The doctor said it was a threatened miscarriage. This was like a thunderbolt on Sean's head. He was a father again. Anne lay on the hospital bed, touching her belly. I don't know what she was thinking, but she still showed a confident smile. Things change. Now she is pregnant too. She thought bitterly that Sean would finally not be obsessed with Evie anymore. Because of the existence of this child, Sean's parents finally had a better face for Anne. After all, no matter who gave birth to the child, it was good, and it was their grandson. As an old man, who doesn't want his family to flourish? And she didn't know that her retribution had just begun. It was the end of the year and I was very busy with work. At this time, I finally moved out of this big flat, slowly. Sean moved in with his parents, and Anne. After explaining the work situation, I simply sent Evie to Sean's house for temporary foster care. Sean's parents were overjoyed and must have treated Evie like a treasure. They were afraid that I would think they were partial to Evie and would never let them see their granddaughter again. And Sean had no other opinions. He knew that I was busy with work, and compared to me sending the child to a nursery or a nanny who didn't know the details, his parents were definitely the most reliable. So he was happy to see this happen. But Evie was young and spoiled, so she cried easily. And didn't have a job to begin with, and she didn't feel well after she got pregnant, so she could only stay in bed to take care of the baby, just like me at the beginning. The crying of the child made her rest even worse, and she couldn't eat or sleep well, and she was simply to the point of neurasthenia. So she often gets angry at Evie. Sean and his parents saw all this. Although Anne was pregnant, Evie was the baby they had held in their hands for so many days. So Sean's parents favored Evie without saying a word. And when Sean tried to mediate, he would unconsciously take sides. This made Anne even more dissatisfied and full of resentment. In the end, she really couldn't control her attitude and even called me to order me to take the child away. Such aggressiveness directly angered Sean's parents. They didn't like this woman who destroyed their son's family, and now they forced the widowed daughter to divorce and leave the house. This woman has a bad heart. At this time, Anne was no longer Sean's spiritual haven, but became the initiator of the war. This family was full of gunpowder all the time. Anne and Sean's parents quarreled, and Sean's parents blamed their son, so Sean had to bite the bullet and step in to mediate the relationship. But Anne's attitude became even more aggressive. This made Sean very angry. In the end, he had to ask me when I would finish work and send Evie back. I didn't say anything after receiving this call. I'll talk to my boss tomorrow and push all the projects on hand. I whispered, you know, my brother also gave birth to a child, and my mother went to take care of it. I hired a nanny before, but she would be lazy when I wasn't paying attention and feed Evie cold water. Such a young child, drinking cold water. Sean's heart was broken. And my situation was simply pitiful. He was really embarrassed to bring it up again, so he found another topic to change the subject. But I also keenly realized that the child was in a bad situation in their family. So the next day, I went to the door and prepared to take the child away. This made Sean's parents anxious. They were afraid that I would leave an impression that their family treated Evie harshly, and they desperately urged Sean to come and explain to me. And I didn't come to pick up the child alone. After all, the child had a lot of things, so I called a male colleague. As soon as this male colleague entered Sean's house and saw and who was losing her temper, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. And was disheveled and swollen. Because of the hormones from pregnancy, she gained a lot of weight. Her hair was originally dyed a very charming wine red, but because of pregnancy, she couldn't go for color correction, so she grew a bunch of black hair roots, which looked like a mismatch between green and yellow, and her whole body was very rough. She was wearing bloated home clothes and cheap plastic slippers, standing in the living room and throwing a tantrum. At first, and didn't notice the male colleague behind me. When she saw clearly, she panicked. "Why did you become like this?" Our vice president looked at and was really surprised. But he really hated and for cheating on him. So he deliberately said to Sean, "You didn't become like this when you were pregnant with me." This was like a bomb that exploded directly in the Xia family. Everyone was shocked. Sean grabbed the man by the collar, forced him against the wall, and asked him what he meant. The male colleague raised his hands and stood against the wall, looking very innocent. "She used to be my mistress. I was still supporting her when you two were together. Don't you know? You are the one who cheated on me. Why are you angry?" The male colleague said leisurely, "When she was with me, she had 2 or 3 abortions. I am sorry for her. Now she is with you and someone is willing to take her over. It is a good destination. I am also very happy." His eyes turned around Evie and me, and he said meaningfully, "It's just pitiful for your child." This was like a bomb, making Sean lose his mind. I was also good to her. I accompanied her every time she had an abortion, and I also made the best package. But the man deliberately hid the second half of the sentence. "After all, there is this previous record. Didn't the doctor say that her pregnancy is not good?" And was completely panicked. She wanted to catch up and push the man away, but the look Sean gave her made her shudder. But what did she do wrong? This man was indeed her financial sponsor, and he had been with her since college. She had only had this man, and he was innocent. Yes, she did have several abortions for him, but this man was unwilling to marry her even though she was pregnant, and even forced her to have an abortion. It was obvious that he was just playing with her. She didn't want to be someone else's plaything for the rest of her life, and she also longed for a normal family and to be the wife of an executive. That's why she hooked up with Sean. What did she do wrong? And Sean just squeezed out this sentence from between his teeth, "We'll talk about our business later." These words made her feel like she was in an ice cave, and she felt cold all over. I called this male colleague over. He is not really a male colleague, after all, he is the vice president, and we have had a lot of interactions recently because of a project. He didn't know what happened before I called him, but when he saw he instantly knew what I meant. And he was also very gentlemanly. Since he was here, he really helped me move things. He casually said, folded the rocking chair and put it in the trunk of my car. "Why, do you still want to give your child a happy family?" This made me look at him strangely. He couldn't figure out what I meant. "You asked me to come here, didn't you want your husband to know about that woman's past, so that they can break up and your family can be complete?" I held up my phone to show him the photo of the divorce certificate. "First of all, that's my ex-husband. Just this morning, the cooling-off period has ended, and I called Sean and I to get the divorce certificate. I told him that I would be on a business trip tomorrow and I had to get the certificate today. He thought and was pregnant, so he came. Secondly, I asked you to come here today out of kindness. They are living together, so they must be honest with each other." This made him laugh. "You are so fake." Finally, I said leisurely, "Even if I beg for food on the street, I will not remarry him. I am not a garbage collector." The man couldn't help asking me, "Then you are?" I looked at him. "Boss, just review the project plan when you have nothing to do. I am a female subordinate, don't care so much about my private affairs." The man touched his nose. He muttered, "Hey, use it and throw it away, what kind of people are they?" The weather was getting colder day by day. After discussing with my mother and sister-in-law, they decided to come and help me take care of the baby. The Chinese New Year was approaching, and Aunt's belly was getting bigger day by day. but Sean had no intention of taking her to get a marriage certificate. This made Anne even more manic. After the visit of the sponsor that day, Sean took Anne to see a doctor. This time he knew Anne's past clearly and confirmed that Anne had indeed undergone 3 pregnancy termination surgeries, commonly known as abortions. That's why her pregnancy was so difficult this time. This made Sean mad. He never thought that his true love, who he would abandon his wife and children to stay with, was actually someone else's mistress. The past was so unbearable, which was completely different from what Anne told him in person. So Sean also asked the doctor how to do amniocentesis for DNA testing. He suspected that the child was not his. The doctor said that Anne's pregnancy was not good, so it was better to wait until the fetus was stable in the middle and late stages of pregnancy. So Sean refused to get a marriage certificate with Anne. He had to wait until the DNA test results came out before he could put his suspicions aside. After my mother came, Sean's parents were too embarrassed to come to see their child. They were worried about her, so they always urged their son to come and see us more often and take some photos and videos to show them. Evie was getting bigger and bigger every day. Sean saw it with his own eyes and loved her in his heart and took the initiative to buy her new clothes. It was almost the new year, and there were a lot of people in the mall. Sean held Evie carefully, fearing that she would be squeezed by others. And just after we had dinner, his current wife-to-be, Anne, who was pregnant, called him desperately. She called several times, asking him when he would go back. When I heard Sean impatiently tell her that he was working overtime at the company and would be back later, I almost couldn't control myself and almost laughed out loud. It was so ridiculous. What a familiar scene. Things change. The children's clothing in this local high-end mall is actually quite expensive. Sean took us shopping and choosing, and he kept holding the clothes and gesturing to Evie, wishing to buy all of them. The salesperson's face was full of smiles, and he was busy recommending him and complimenting Evie's cuteness. And he was very cool, waving his hand and asking people to pack it up and pay by credit card. At the same time, he hung up Anne's urging calls again and again. But his phone was too loud. Sean looked at his phone helplessly, turned around and explained to me, "I can't help it. I don't want to go home and listen to her nagging." Sean smiled bitterly and said, "Her pregnancy is unstable and she has nothing to do, so her temper is getting worse and worse. She quarrels with my mother at home every day." He complained, "You didn't do this when you were pregnant." "Yes. Why didn't I do this when I was pregnant?" I smiled and comforted him, saying nothing, just showing my gentleness and thoughtfulness. But my heart was cold. "I was so good at the beginning, didn't you abandon your wife and children and live with her?" Bullshit life. I saw that Sean's eyes were looking at me more and more eagerly. On the other side. And finally lost her temper. She had Sean's secondary card. So she called the bank to check his spending and found that he was in this mall. Sean told him that he was working overtime at the company, but now he was buying children's clothes in the mall. He dared to lie to her. And was so angry that she rushed to the mall in a taxi. But when she entered the door, she accidentally knocked down someone else's child. The parents of the family stood up instantly, pulled her and stopped her from leaving, and scolded her loudly. Anne's emotions and spirit had already reached the edge. She was hysterical and made a scene, relying on her big belly to make a scene. The family was not a good person either, and they started to scold her at that time. In the chaos, an unknown child's ice cream fell to the ground, and Anne stepped on it when she and the hostess pushed each other, and she fell to the ground. She fell on her back at that time. The faces of the people nearby changed. Because she couldn't stand up from the fall while holding her belly, she could only groan in pain. When she raised her hand that was stretched under her skirt, her hand was full of blood. At that time, there was chaos. Everyone avoided it, fearing that they would be involved. The security guard of the mall quickly called the police and 120. Sean finally arrived. He half knelt on the ground, tightly holding Anne's hand, listening to her hysterical screams of pain and curses, and his face was full of annoyance and disgust. I held Evie in my arms, coaxing my daughter again and again, watching the big show in front of me without any ripples in my heart. And said someone pushed her down. But this clumsy lie didn't stand up to scrutiny. When the police checked the surveillance footage at the mall, they clearly saw that she stepped on ice cream and fell down. And the ice cream was never found out who dropped it on the ground. It could only be an accident. The bitter fruit of miscarriage had to be swallowed by Anne and Sean. Because of this incident, Anne and Sean were furious, but this time Sean was also full of anger and never indulged her again. Because Sean really couldn't figure it out. He didn't understand why Anne came out to cause trouble for him and quarrel with him when she was pregnant. The doctor clearly told her to stay in bed, and his mother served him like a donkey at home every day. His whole family let her go, and even didn't let her work and gave her a secondary card, but why did she have to come to the mall? She had to make trouble once. Evie was his daughter, couldn't he buy a piece of clothing for his daughter? Also, she bumped into someone else's child when she entered the house. Why did she act so violently? And even hurt her own child? And couldn't understand it even more. She didn't know why Sean would rather help the child's family who had nothing to do with him than stand by her. She was the victim. She lost her child. The two of them got angry and quarreled and smashed everything in the house. In the end, Sean was exhausted. He stood on the messy ground and told Anne to break up. And couldn't believe it. She basically lost everything, only Sean was left, and she really wanted to be Sean's wife. So Anne began to beg and give in, trying to save the relationship in every way. But this time Sean didn't respond. In the past, Anne was his safe haven. Now she is the source of his pain. Meanwhile, Sean's attitude towards me became better and better. He felt guilty towards Evie and me, and with the encouragement of his parents, he even had the idea of remarrying. Yes, that's it. He was just confused by Anne before, so he behaved so absurdly. He admitted that he was a little impulsive. But now he has come to his senses, and he thinks he should give his child a happy family. Facing Sean's enthusiasm, I just smiled. I think life is really absurd. In the past, for true love, he could push me to the ground after my confinement, and listen to our daughter crying in the bedroom. But he was completely unmoved and simply abandoned us. And now he thinks that he can make peace with us by just talking and pretending to have changed his mind and made up his mind. Let's just say, there is no such good thing in the world. It happened that the company wanted to appoint a European project director, and I volunteered without saying a word. At the same time, I also got passports for my mother and Evie. This project requires permanent stay, and all the company's executives have families, so it was very difficult to find the right person. Seeing that I took the initiative, the company was very happy and bought air tickets for us at that time. Sean was still immersed in the happiness of regaining a happy family. So he couldn't wait to tear off the shameful scar of Anne from his body. How sweet they were before, how ruthless they are now. Seeing that the two of them were making a big fuss, and went directly to Sean's company and smashed his office. Many friends even posted on WeChat moments to make fun of me. I just quietly packed my things and matters for going abroad, and entrusted my brother to help consign the house. Our flight is tomorrow. I smiled and watched Sean drive to the company gate to pick me up with a bouquet of roses in his hand. And a moment later, Anne followed him, and the two of them quarreled and even fought at the company gate. I felt proud. Whatever choice you make, you will have to bear the consequences. What kind of person you fall in love with will determine what kind of family you will form. They chose each other, so now they should enjoy each other. Life is like this. There is no reunion in the world, only regrets. Just like we had a good start, but didn't say goodbye properly. But no one will wait for another person willingly and without complaints. There is no prodigal son in the world. So be it, he will go to his future, and I will go to my life. Although many years ago, when we were still teenagers, we both felt that we could spend the rest of our lives together, accompany each other, snuggle up, and go through thousands of mountains and rivers. End of the story.